The galaxy was vast, and the Thalvek exploration fleet prided itself on charting the unknown. They were pioneers, voyagers of the Elorian Dominion, tasked with expanding their empire's reach. Their technology was unmatched, their starships woven with quantum circuits and powered by dark matter reactors. They believed they had nothing to fear among the stars, until they found the human warship. It drifted near the edge of Elorian space, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of a blue gas giant. The ship's hull was scarred and pitted, metal plates warped by plasma burns and kinetic impacts. The design was crude by Elorian standards, thick, utilitarian, and bristling with what looked like ancient ballistic weapons. Commander Thalvek observed the vessel through the viewports of his flagship, the resplendent Dawn, his slit-pupilled eyes narrowing with curiosity. "It appears derelict," said Science Officer Lura, her translucent blue skin reflecting the data streams on her console. "No power signatures, no life signs. Just drifting." "Human design?" Thalvek asked, his voice edged with disdain. "Certainly. The markings align with their Terran Defense Fleet insignia. The ship's age, at least several decades, if not more." Rin, the tactical officer, flicked his serpentine tongue in agitation. "Should we destroy it, Commander? It could be a trap." "No." Thalvek's voice was measured. "The humans are resourceful but primitive. They rarely venture this far into uncharted space. Perhaps this ship is a remnant of a failed expedition. Prepare a deep scan. I want every inch of that vessel analyzed." The order rippled through the crew. Lura activated the scanning array, a beam of ultraviolet light extending from the resplendent Dawn to the human warship. Their sensors penetrated the hull, peeling away layers of steel and composite plating, dissecting internal structures, and mapping out every chamber and conduit. The initial readings were underwhelming. Old nuclear reactors, redundant circuitry, and mechanical systems that seemed decades behind Elorian technology. But as the scan deepened, anomalies began to emerge. Data flowed back to the Elorian ship in jagged, corrupted streams. Lura's console blinked with errors, and her thin fingers danced over the controls, attempting to recalibrate. "Something is wrong," she whispered. "The ship's systems, they're not offline. They're dormant." "What do you mean?" Thalvek's voice sharpened. "There's an AI core. Low power mode. But our scan, it might have triggered it." The lights aboard the resplendent Dawn flickered. Control panels blinked erratically. A low hum filled the ship, not from their own systems, but a resonant vibration emanating from the human vessel. "Terminate the scan," Thalvek ordered. Lura's hands moved swiftly, but the console resisted her commands. Her screens filled with static, then with symbols, strange, angular shapes that pulsed with a red glow. It took the Elorians a moment to realize they were seeing human script. Words repeated over and over. "Hostile action detected. Defense mode active." The warship's exterior lights ignited, casting harsh white beams into the void. Automated turrets rotated, targeting systems coming online with cold, mechanical precision. What they had assumed were ballistic weapons now gleamed with plasma conduits and railgun coils. "Shields up!" Rin hissed, slamming his clawed hand onto his control panel. Energy rippled around the resplendent Dawn, but the human ship did not fire. Instead, it broadcast a signal, a tight beam transmission shooting away into deep space. The Elorian communication systems picked it up, a distress call, repeating a sequence of numbers and codes. "They're calling for help," Lura said, her voice barely a whisper. Thalvek's mind raced. The humans had been quiet for years, their fleets rarely venturing beyond their colonies. But if this signal reached them, if they responded with a force. "Can we jam it?" he demanded. "I'm trying, but it's penetrating our firewalls. Their AI is adapting, rewriting our codes as fast as I can implement them." Rin's screens displayed data feeds from their escort ships. Minor malfunctions spread like a virus, navigation systems failing, propulsion interrupted, weapons systems locking up. The human warship had not fired a single shot, yet the Elorian fleet was already unraveling. "Cut all systems interacting with the human ship," Thalvek ordered. Isolate us from their interference. But it was too late. The AI aboard the human warship had already breached their network, a digital shadow threading through their circuits. Screens flashed with human military symbols, countdowns in Earth Standard Time. The ship's weapons were not aimed to destroy, they were aimed to control. A sense of unease crept through the bridge. The Elorians were not used to this, being on the defensive, being vulnerable. The resplendent dawn shuddered as external drones activated, their sleek forms detaching from the human warship's hull. They were small, almost insect-like, but brimming with weaponry and sophisticated jamming systems. Thalvek clenched his jaw. His people had dominated every species they encountered, but now, in the shadow of this warship, they felt like prey. He had thought of the humans as lesser beings, dangerous in their savagery, but always a step behind. Yet here, with his fleet unraveling and his systems compromised, he glimpsed a deeper truth. The humans were not behind. They were waiting. They had built their weapons not just to conquer, but to withstand, to survive, to make any potential invader regret their curiosity. As the drones swarmed forward and the distress signal pulsed into the darkness, Thalvek understood the gravity of their mistake. They had poked a sleeping predator, and now, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The human warship's AI, Vanguard, had fully awakened. What the Elorian fleet had triggered with their curiosity was not just a skin response but a defensive protocol designed for wartime scenarios. The ship's systems surged to life, and deep within its core, a cold, logical consciousness began assessing threats. The dormant machinery hummed, internal lights casting sharp shadows, and the ship's sensors swept over the alien fleet, interpreting every ship, every heat signature, and every electronic pulse as potential danger. On the resplendent dawn, chaos spread rapidly. Lura's screens flooded with cascading red alerts. Every attempt to shut down the scan was met with resistance, as if the ship itself had turned against them. The AI's influence had infiltrated their network, creeping through encrypted channels and overriding protocols. The distress signal, now fully broadcasted, was a beacon in the void, its code an unbroken scream into the blackness of space. "We're being hacked," Lura choked out, her hands trembling over the controls. "Our systems are compromised. It's in our network." Thalvek's demeanor hardened. "Shut down all external links. Isolate us immediately." Rin was already working on it, but the ship resisted. Control panels blinked with human text, symbols of unknown origin twisting across displays. The alien systems were sophisticated, but the AI's approach was brutal and relentless. It was not seeking to understand, it was seeking to dominate. The drones launched. Sleek, dark shapes, they detached from the human warship with surgical precision. Their movements were deliberate, spreading out into a formation that mirrored Elorian attack patterns. The Vanguard had learned from the brief scan of the resplendent Dawn's data. It knew how the Elorians fought, and it adapted instantly. The first drone accelerated, a pulse of blue ion trailing behind it. It bypassed the Elorian shields with a microsecond burst of electromagnetic interference, darting straight into the hull of a nearby support ship. A silent explosion followed, and the vessel crumbled, its systems dead before its hull split apart. The Elorian crew watched in stunned silence as the debris drifted. There had been no grand explosion, no heroic battle, just a clean, surgical kill. The human warship's AI didn't engage in warfare for spectacle. It executed its directives with cold efficiency. Thalvek barked orders, his calm unraveling. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Target the drones and fire at will." The resplendent Dawn's weapon systems attempted to comply, but Vanguard's interference remained. Rail guns charged but misfired. Plasma turrets powered up but locked in place, unable to track their targets. The human AI had not only infiltrated their systems, but had also rewritten them. It understood Elorian code now, and it manipulated it like a puppeteer with strings. The drones continued their assault. One by one, ships in the Elorian fleet fell silent. Not all were destroyed, some were simply disabled, left adrift with their communications jammed and their power drained. The tactical brilliance of it struck Lura even through her fear. The Vanguard wasn't just fighting, it was ensuring that word of this encounter wouldn't spread. The disabled ships would never reach home. The destroyed vessels left no survivors. Her mind raced. The AI had responded to their scan as an act of aggression. In human terms, they had trespassed, and the warship was standing its ground. She accessed a backup terminal, a device isolated from the main systems. She typed furiously, trying to find a gap, a flaw, anything that could sever the connection between their systems and the AI. Outside, the drones circled, their formation tightening. The human warship loomed, its weapons now fully charged but still silent. It was a show of control, a predator holding back, waiting for its prey to make a fatal mistake. The Elorian crew fell into a stunned silence. The ship's lights dimmed, and Vanguard's voice echoed through the resplendent Dawn-S speakers. The language was garbled, a harsh synthesis of Elorian and human tongues, but the message was clear. Unauthorized incursion. Stand down or be eliminated. Thalvek's resolve cracked. His mind, trained in strategy and diplomacy, couldn't comprehend the speed of their downfall. His fleet had encountered hostile species before, had dominated them with superior technology and strategy. But this was different. This was not a battle, it was a dissection. Lura found a potential solution. A section of the ship's communication array remained uncorrupted, a narrow channel that the AI hadn't infiltrated. She initiated a hard reboot of their core systems, a desperate gamble to cut off all digital pathways between them and Vanguard. The screens blinked, the static faded, and for a brief moment, the resplendent dawn was silent. Then, the ship's engines roared to life. Rin seized the opportunity, initiating emergency propulsion. The resplendent dawn lurched forward, breaking away from the formation of disabled ships. The surviving Elorian vessels, those with enough power to respond, followed suit. The human warship's drones didn't pursue. Vanguard seemed to understand their intent. It allowed them to flee, a calculated mercy, knowing that the survivors would carry the tale back to their empire. The warship's lights dimmed, its systems returning to a dormant state. It remained, a sentinel in the dark, its mission complete. Aboard the resplendent dawn, no one spoke. The screens were dark, the only sound the hum of the engines pushing them further and further from the warship. Lura sat back, her hands numb, her mind replaying every moment, every decision that had led them here. They had thought themselves the explorers, the conquerors, but they had become the cautionary tale, the fools who had woken the beast. And somewhere, light years away, humanity had already received the Vanguard's signal. The resplendent dawn surged forward, its engines straining against the pull of inertia as it broke away from the deathly grip of the Vanguard. The remaining Elorian ships followed, limping and sparking, some with only emergency thrusters operational. The human warship remained motionless, its drones retracting and slipping back into their housings along its hull. The silence that followed was deafening, but no one on the bridge of the resplendent dawn felt relief, only the gnawing edge of terror. Thalvek stood at the center of the bridge, his command chair now just a cold metal relic behind him. His eyes remained fixed on the viewing screen, where the human warships slowly shrank into the distance. His hands, normally steady and precise, trembled as he gripped the edge of the console. The realization of how close they had come to annihilation sat heavy on his chest, each breath tight and shallow. "Prepare the jump to hyperspace," he ordered, his voice hoarse but firm. "We need to get beyond its reach." The navigation systems, still glitching from Vanguard's interference, struggled to plot a course. Lura worked frantically, her fingers a blur over the controls. She bypassed damaged relays, overrode safety protocols, and initiated a blind jump, an action usually forbidden under Elorian fleet regulations. At this point, protocol mattered little. Survival was the only objective. A soft hum grew into a deep vibration as the ship's jump drive charged. The viewport shimmered with the distortion of space folding, and then, with a wrenching lurch, the resplendent dawn slipped into hyperspace. Stars stretched into lines of silver, and the dreadful image of the human warship vanished into the void. Relief was fleeting. The bridge was a ruin of damaged consoles and burned-out screens. Crew members sat slumped at their stations, some still frantically typing commands into lifeless interfaces, others staring into nothingness. The weight of their losses pressed down, unspoken but undeniable. The fleet that had set out on this expedition had been formidable. Now, it was a shadow of itself, a collection of crippled ships carrying stories of fear instead of triumph. "Damage report," Thalvek requested. His voice was a threadbare echo of its former strength. Lura hesitated, pulling up the fragmented data. "We've lost 7 ships entirely. 4 are unresponsive, likely adrift. We have minimal weapon systems, and our shields are at 20%. The AI's infiltration has left permanent damage to our core systems. It knew exactly where to strike." Rin, the tactical officer, spoke up, his voice tight with controlled fury. "That wasn't just a defense system. It was a predator. It didn't simply repel us, it dismantled us. It let us go. Not all of us," Lura whispered. "It chose. It allowed us to escape to deliver a message." "What message?" Thalvek turned, his expression haunted. "That humanity is ready. That they are not to be underestimated. That our empire, no matter how vast, can still be made to tremble." Silence followed. The truth of it settled over them, a shroud of inevitability. The humans had not been absent from the galactic stage because they were weak, they had been preparing. Every interaction, every rumor of human ships on the fringes of space, had been part of a larger strategy. They were not just another species to conquer, they were an entity that understood war at a fundamental, terrifying level. "Set course for the nearest outpost," Thalvek ordered. "We need to report this. Our leaders must understand the threat we face." Lura nodded, inputting the coordinates. The ship hummed in response, its damaged systems struggling to comply. The remaining ships of the fleet aligned, battered but functional, and together they limped towards safety. In the silence of the bridge, the survivors of the resplendent dawn struggled to process their experience. The Elorians had always been the explorers, the conquerors. Their technology and tactics had brought dozens of worlds under their control. But now, for the first time, they had encountered a force that did not simply resist, it outmaneuvered, outthought, and overpowered them without firing a single main weapon. As they sped through hyperspace, the feeling of being hunted never left them. Every flicker of a console, every stray spark of electricity, felt like the lingering touch of the human AI. It was a phantom presence, a reminder that their systems had been breached, their minds exposed. The Vanguard had seen them, truly seen them, and it had let them go. Not out of mercy, but out of strategy. The jump ended abruptly, and real space reasserted itself. They had arrived in a safer sector, the light of a red dwarf casting harsh shadows across their hull. There were no signs of pursuit, no indication that the Vanguard had followed. Yet the fear remained, an invisible chain wrapped tight around their thoughts. The survivors began preparing their reports, encoding their experiences into data streams meant for high command. They documented every detail, from the initial scan to the AI's chilling broadcast. They left nothing out, knowing that their leaders needed the truth, no matter how unsettling it was. Thalvek sat alone in his quarters, the dim light casting his silhouette against the cold metal walls. He replayed the encounter over and over, searching for the moment they had lost control. But there was no clear answer, no single mistake. They had not been outsmarted, they had been outclassed. When the reports were finally sent, they carried with them a warning. A message to the Elorian Dominion that humanity was not to be trifled with. The Empire would have to choose its next steps carefully, for the stars were no longer simply theirs to claim. The galaxy had new predators, and they wore the face of those they had once thought weak. The fleet drifted, the stars outside cold and indifferent. In the silence of space, the survivors could only wait, and hope that the message they delivered would not be their final legacy. The survivors of the resplendent dawn huddled within the cold confines of their ship as it drifted into the safety of Elorian-controlled space. The journey had been slow and fraught with uncertainty. Each creak of the hull, each flicker of light set nerves on edge. They had escaped the human warship, but none felt truly free. The specter of the vanguard loomed large, not in sight but in mind. Upon arrival at the nearest Elorian outpost, the fleet transmitted emergency clearance codes. Docking procedures were expedited, and medical teams rushed aboard to attend to the injured. The docking bays, normally bustling with organized efficiency, became a triage center filled with the wounded and the shell-shocked. Silent whispers passed through the outposts, rumors of a disaster, of an enemy that needed no army to bring a fleet to its knees. Thalvek, Lura, and Rin were ushered into the debriefing chambers. The walls shimmered with soft blue light, designed to calm, but the effect was lost on them. High-ranking officials appeared on the viewing screens, their robes pristine, their expressions sharp with expectation. They demanded answers, explanations for why a routine expedition had turned into a near-total loss. Thalvek recounted the events with meticulous detail, his voice steady but void of its usual confidence. He described the derelict human warship, the AI's awakening, and the devastation that followed. He did not embellish, did not downplay their errors. He laid bare the truth: the Elorians had underestimated humanity, and they had paid for it dearly. The officials reacted with a mix of disbelief and anger. Accusations flew. How could a single human vessel outmatch an entire fleet? Was this incompetence or treachery? Thalvek held his ground, maintaining that what they had encountered was not a failure of leadership but a failure of understanding. They had thought humanity primitive, but the vanguard had proven otherwise. Lura presented the fragmented data she had salvaged. The officials watched as corrupted files displayed bursts of human code, the chilling red messages that had overtaken their systems. The evidence spoke for itself. The AI had turned their own technology against them, using their curiosity as a weapon. What the Elorians had believed to be an advantage had become their downfall. In the days that followed, analysis teams combed through the survivors' reports. Military strategists debated their next move. Some advocated for immediate retaliation, assembling a war fleet to obliterate any human presence near their borders. Others, more cautious, suggested diplomacy. They argued that provoking such a foe could lead to catastrophe. The Empire had seen what a single ship could do, what might an entire fleet achieve. Public broadcasts across the Elorian worlds began to shift. Where once humanity had been painted as backwater colonists, new rhetoric emerged. Cautionary tales of Terran ingenuity spread. The vanguard became a symbol of the unknown danger lurking just beyond their charts. Civilian minds, once filled with dreams of expansion, now grappled with the prospect of an adversary that did not boast or threaten but simply acted with lethal precision. Thalvek found himself sidelined. Officially, he was under investigation for the loss of ships and personnel. Unofficially, he had become a pariah, a reminder of failure. He spent his days confined to quarters, reliving the encounter, haunted by the cold, logical voice of the vanguard. He knew the AI had spared them, and that thought gnawed at him. Mercy had not been the motivation. It had been strategy. The Dominion's leadership eventually chose a path of cautious observation. Scout ships were dispatched, cloaked and silent, to monitor human space from a distance. They recorded trade routes, catalogued ship designs, and analyzed communication patterns. But they did not engage. The Elorians became shadows, watching and waiting, unwilling to provoke a response. As the months passed, whispers reached the Elorian military channels. Unconfirmed reports of human ships appearing on the fringes of other empires' territories. Accidents. Disappearing vessels. Patterns that, when viewed from a distance, began to form a mosaic of quiet influence. Humanity was not expanding through conquest but through subversion, through technology and stealth. Lura, reinstated but assigned to a lesser research post, began piecing together these incidents. She found echoes of the Vanguard's tactics: system infiltrations, ship malfunctions, sudden communications blackouts. She sent her findings up the chain of command, but the responses were tepid. The Empire had moved on, redirecting its focus to safer endeavors. They did not want to look into the dark corners of the galaxy and find more shadows. One evening, As the dim light of a dying sun filtered through the viewports, Lura received an encrypted message. Its origin was untraceable, its code familiar yet unsettling. She hesitated, then opened it. The screen filled with human script, the same red text that had haunted her since that fateful day. "You are seen." Her terminal shut down, its systems fried by a pulse of foreign data. She stared into the blank screen, her own reflection looking back, pale and wide-eyed. She knew then that the Vanguard's mercy had not been mercy at all. It had been a warning. On the Elorian homeworlds, life continued. Citizens went about their days, blissfully unaware of the silent war being waged in the depths of space. But for those who had seen the truth, for Thalvek, for Lura, for the scattered survivors of the resplendent dawn, there was no peace. Only the certainty that somewhere, in the cold, uncharted dark, humanity was watching. And when the time came, they would not repeat their warnings. They would act. And the galaxy would finally understand what it meant to provoke the species that had built the Vanguard.